Hi, this is A New Nigeria with Wale Oluwade. This is your current affairs program where we critically examine the strategic issues bedeviling Nigeria's developmental aspirations and boldly offer practical suggestions on building the Nigeria of our collective desires. Today's episode promises to be engaging and exciting, so get ready as we begin in earnest. And now, let's get on with it. Today, we're looking at the topic, the National Assembly and good governance. A key element of democratic practice is the role of the legislature acting as a check and balance on the other two arms of government. The critical responsibility of oversighting on the activities of the executive arm, especially, is strategic to the efficient running and functioning of a stable and efficient country. In Nigeria, however, our experience in the last 24 years, but particularly the outgoing Ninth Assembly, has simply been a huge farce of democratic practice. As the race to elect the leadership of the 10th National Assembly hots up, how do we shape the conversation to focus on patriotism, competence, and experience, rather than party loyalty, ethnicity, and who can outspend the other among the contenders? These are some of the issues we're examining today. We'll take this short break, and when we return, we'll get right into our conversation. Please stay with us. Welcome back. My guest is already here. Mr. Igo, good afternoon.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Good to be here, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Igo Akerega is the president of the Civil Liberties Organization and also a member of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. He's been a journalist for many years. Mr. Igo, once again, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you once again.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, let's sink our teeth into this brouhaha over the leadership selection process for the National Assembly, the 10th National Assembly members. What do you make of the candidacies of the contenders for the positions of Senate President and the Vice, and also Speaker and the Deputy? What do you make of the candidacies of the leading contenders?
Well, I'm sure most Nigerians will be as surprised as I am at this point when the APC told everyone that they were going to have a discussion among themselves and come out with the best for Nigeria in terms of who they will produce as the Senate President, the Deputy Senate President, and Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. So far, 4 names. The APC came out with 4 names. For the President of the Senate, the APC has told Nigerians that their preference is former Akwa Ibom State Governor, Godswill Akpabio, and then to be deputized as Deputy Senate President by
Jibrin Barao.
Jibrin Barao, yes. And then for the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, yes, and then Kalu from Abia State as Deputy Speaker. Well, if you look at these 4 individuals, these are just yes men, lackeys. Why Nigerians are still smarting from the shenanigan that was the 8 years of Ahmad Lawan's leadership of the Senate, and of course Femi Gbajabiamila, who everybody knows from Lagos State, ordinarily should be a good man, but coming from the Tinubu School of Politics, we all then also saw what happened at the House of Reps. But the worst of it all, the landmark disappointment, which turned out to be a huge circus that threw Nigeria into a massive debt trap, is Ahmed Lawan, who is the head of the National Assembly, the parliament as it were. Disaster. Almost every Nigerian agrees on that, including members of the APC. They know that the leadership of the National Assembly was a disaster. But what is this now unfolding, the outgoing, yes. Of course, by June, they will all be up there. Yes. But the shock that awaits Nigeria is not these 4 names that are being bandied. Akpabio, who has, well, as governor of Akwa Ibom.
Before we get to that, Igo, sorry to butt in. Before we get to that, let me even ask you, can you explain why the executive arm of government will be interested in determining who emerges as leaders of the National Assembly? You know, I mean, it's been a recurring feature in this 4th Republic where successive presidents of the country would insist, beginning from President Obasanjo, would insist on choosing, as it were, the leadership, practically hand-picking. Why would the executive arm, please, can you explain to us, because you've been a journalist for many decades, so I'm sure you are not strange to how democracy is practiced in advanced democracies.
Absolutely.
Is it the norm that the executive arm wants to foist, as it were, their own preference, their own preferences of candidates amongst legislature on a different arm of government? And what does it bode for, good governance and all of that, please?
What we have in Nigeria really is not a democracy. What we have is what we call selective aberration, such that Nigerians have been they are holding the short end of the stick. Like you rightly observed, from 1999 when Obasanjo became, under President Obasanjo, you had about 4 or 5 Senate presidents who routinely were removed once the president thinks that they are no longer doing this.
That was the days of banana peel.
Banana peels. They will just tell, look, as we are
swept away, Chuba Okadigbo swept away, Vance Ewere,
several of them, but then, of course, why does the executive in Nigeria, why do they show so much interest in who becomes the leadership of the National Assembly? A simple reason, so that they can find willing collaborators to pilfer state resources. How do they pilfer state resources? So in Nigeria, what we have really, the judiciary has been struggling to exert control of its over its own affairs. But you can hardly find a difference between the parliament and the executive. And most times you find the presidents, once they get elected, they forgo every other thing. They are interested in who becomes the Senate president, the deputy Senate president, the speaker, and the deputy speaker. Why, as I said earlier, is just to collectively share the loot that belongs to the patrimony of the common people of Nigeria. Well, as I said earlier, we are moving from a situation that we consider very bad under Ahmed Lawan to what might befuddle all of us, worst situation, if indeed Akpabio becomes the Senate president. Well, I don't personally hold anything against Akpabio, but his pedigree does not suggest that he's bringing any serious business, into the National Assembly, because he's being investigated by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and of course the ICPC and other anti-graft agencies. For the other individuals that have also been lined up to become leaders of the parliament, they do not inspire any hope in Nigerians that they are coming to do anything different. Because if indeed they are coming to do anything different, the tussle will not be as intense as what we are seeing. To the extent that even members of the APC themselves are now revolting against their own party and say, look, if it comes to the worst, they might just team up with the opposition to try and pick an independent leadership for the National Assembly. Really, that is where that is where we should be going. We need an independent leadership for the National Assembly.
I hear you, and I'm sure Nigerians are listening. The legislature in a democracy has 3 basic functions: oversight, lawmaking, and then representation. They come from various constituencies and they represent them at the National Assembly. So, but the key, the 2 for me that are really relevant, that are really strategic, are lawmaking and oversight. From where we're coming from, Igo, we have had this recurring issue of constitutional amendments. The 1999 Constitution, heads, professors of law, Ben Wabueze, Akin Oyebo, the people who are extremely knowledgeable and savvy in the issue of constitutional democracy or governance, and several others have jointly christened this 1999 Constitution as worse than, worse, that it is
previous constitution.
It is really an aberration. Yeah. And until it is fixed, this country can't really make substantial progress. And you'll see from the 5th or 4th Assembly, attempts have been made to amend this Constitution. But you see what they do, they just tinker at the margins, they just play around and leave the core issues untouched. For instance, devolution of powers to the local governments, because you and I know that the local governments are practically dead in all practical purposes, and that's why you have criminality taking over the forest and the villages of Nigeria. No development. And secondly, look at the issue of policing. So we've been saying let's have community or state policing. So National Assemblies successively, they'll come in, they budget huge sum, 5-10 billion for constitutional amendments, but then they leave the issues. Do you see the hope of that happening, that this 10th Assembly, let's even leave the issue of whether it's Akpabi or whoever, do you even see them having the mind that Nigeria is in such a bad state and that we need to do some of these things to move this country forward, rather than playing to the gallery?
Well, for me, I really do not know where people get their hope from. Sometimes I ask myself if I live in Nigeria, the same country that the people who think that Nigeria is going to get it right. I was listening to one top clergy, somebody who leads the Redeemed Church, who was quoted as saying that, people should pray for the president-elect. He's going to transform the country. And this has been the same rhetoric for over the years. Basically, there is nothing to suggest that we are going to have a very serious governance going forward in 2023. Well, I'm not sounding so pessimistic, but really the indices and the signs are there.
And the pedigree of the
pedigree of the individuals who are coming to manage our affairs does not suggest that they are coming to do serious business with our lives. What they are simply coming to do is to expand on the scope of previous stealings and lootings that have taken place. Really, that is just what I see. Otherwise, why you talked about devolution of powers to the other components of governance in the country. There have been a lot of reluctance to do that because once that is done, it would then mean that there will be some level of fiscal independence. Exactly. There will be inter competition amongst all the tiers of government, the regions, the states, and the local governments. And for people who have been feeding fat on the Nigerian system, they won't allow that. For example, take a look at the individuals that are coming into the Senate. These are former governors of their states.
Exactly.
They see the Senate as a retirement ground. Once you are done with 8 years of being governor of your state, the next thing you have to do is to find a way into the Senate. And then, now, how do you expect people who have created a problem find a solution to those problems? You need external individuals, though Nigerians really, people who have not been part of the rot, to be able to solve this problem that is before us. So that is where I say that my pessimism is drawn from this pool of, individuals who are coming to the national assembly, even at the executive level, people we are electing. Well, as it is now very clear that even the votes of Nigerians no longer count because the beavers who were told it's going to be a game changer, you're going to get the best out of it. But from what we have seen, there's a supposedly brazen manipulation of the system, and people are being foisted as leaders across the national, subnational levels of the country. Well, we wait to see what happens, but really, Nigerians need to raise their consciousness level such that they should be able to take their destiny in their own hands and challenge these few crops of politicians who think that they can take everyone for a ride.
Igor, we'll take this short break and then we'll return for our conversation. Okay. We'll take this short break, and when we return, we'll continue with our conversation. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Igor, before we went on that short break, we're talking about the National Assembly playing its constitutional role. And we talked about one of their duties, constitutionally is lawmaking. Another is oversight. Now, reports out there suggest that the NDDC, Niger Delta Development Commission, has abandoned projects worth about 1,700 plus abandoned projects in Bayelsa State alone. There are others in some of the other states. But in Bayelsa alone, the NDDC has 1,700 plus abandoned projects. And one of the people, in fact, the person the APC has, penciled down to be Senate president, once chaired the NDDC. And there was a face-off between himself and the MD, a lady, there was a public face-off, allegations and counter-allegations, very sour and unsavory, public whatever. Now, how does that, you said something now, so how do you expect such individuals when they get to the leadership of the legislature to now actually perform they are core functions of oversight on the executive arm of government. Can you speak to that, please?
Let me start from even the NDDC itself.
Yes.
The NDDC has become a cash cow.
Sorry, Hugo. In fact, you mentioned it now because even today, on one of the major TV networks, in fact, I think AIT actually, specifically, on the scroll bar, the National Assembly just approved a budget of about 800 billion.
Yeah. For the NDDC.
For the NDDC. Yes. 800 billion for the NDDC. And the new chairman, Mrs. Loretta Onoche, appointed personally 12 aides. And the same National Assembly approved about 500 million, 400 and something million for those aides. Can you speak to this, please?
Well,
Sorry to have interrupted you.
Yes. I was just telling you that the NDDC has become a cash cow for all manners of politicians in the Niger Delta.
Can this country make progress like this, Igor?
No way. No, that is why sometimes I fall short of calling for a revolution. You know, I think this democracy that we practice can't take Nigeria out of the woods. And each time I listen to Ayo Adebanjo, a Afenifere leader in Lagos State, I just cannot help but agree with the man that, look, we do not have a constitution, we don't have a law. Let's throw this trash, this piece of document away, and let the Nigerian people sit down and make a law for themselves. I am from the Niger Delta, I'm from Delta State.
Sorry to bust it, but you know that the process of law-making, constitutional making, is not easy and straightforward. That's why some have argued that only if we had patriots, like, in the National Assembly, what stopped the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th National Assembly? In fact, let's forget about the 9th, the outgoing one. Let's talk about the Bukola Saraki National Senate that was somewhat independent because of the way it emerged. You would have expected that to have, even though, the counter narrative is that even if they did succeed in passing the law, would the president then, but they will have overridden him if they really wanted to go. Because back to the point, Igor, as of last week or 2 weeks ago, this same National Assembly stepped down the budget of NDDC. And suddenly,
for negotiation, they stepped, you see, we all know what is happening in this country. They stepped it down for negotiation, such that, we are going to pass this 800 billion for you. How much is our share? Wow. That's what is going on. This same government, this outgoing government, $800 million for, they said, they needed for palliative, for subsidy, that they will not remove. Yes. Because they were just hoping that this money can come now. It becomes, then of course you saw another 12.2 billion that I saw, where they were giving $10,000 to members of the parliament, and it generated a lot of quarrel. Some people didn't get. So that is the ways and means, supplementary budget loan that was taken by President Buhari as a parting gift. This is a man who is leaving power in less than 1.5 weeks or thereabout. He goes and ways and means National Assembly, Ahmed Lawan, all of that. They banded together as a group of people, signed the law hurriedly, and then what they do, just half the money and start sharing. Well, I would have had some hope that, the government that is coming in can actually probe, because whether we like it or not, the Buhari administration has turned out to be the most corrupt ever in the history of Nigeria, going by from 7 points.
Do you have any proof to back that up?
The proof is this. When he took over from former President Goodluck Jonathan in 2015, Jonathan left behind a debt of 7.8 or so, billion. And this man is leaving us with a debt of over 44 trillion. 44 trillion.
It's actually more than that.
Yes.
It's almost 80 trillion naira.
Over
100
trillion.
billion US
that
dollars.
Is over 100 billion US dollars, which is well over 80 trillion naira. So now you look at that. Look at the geometric rise. And then you want to look at, if you take all of this money, what are the indices on ground that you can see? You build new airports. Did you build new roads? Did you build refineries that now Nigeria has the capacity to refine locally without import? Nothing.
Is the electricity stable now?
Is the electricity stable?
Exactly. For industries?
We are still struggling. It's still between the 4,000
between 4,000 and 3,000 megawatts.
Nigeria between 4,000 5,000 megawatts. No, in the twilight of his administration, he just passed the law that, oh, states cannot generate
and use as we wind down.
So the NDDC itself is a cash cow where people just go down and steal money, deprive the Niger Delta of development.
This National Assembly, this 10th Coming National Assembly, because whether we like it or not, they've been given certificate of returns, yes. You know. So we have to make the best use. What will you advise? Because no matter what APC or whoever does to say we have penciled down, they still have to go to the House when it is inaugurated and from amongst themselves elect their leaders. What do you say to, let's speak to the 109 senators now. Speak to them, advise them, what do you think they should do for the interest of Nigeria?
In fact, if I can kneel down in this studio, I will kneel down. I want to beg the lawmakers elect across the political parties. Exactly. Please, they should ignore their political parties. Walk in there, think of this country, think of tomorrow. We don't want to walk the path of Sudan because the way the country is being managed at the moment, if you impose a National Assembly leadership that cannot check the executive, I cannot predict what will happen. The youths have expressed their political preference through their ballot boxes, and it doesn't appear to be working. The last hope of the common man, the last hope of Nigerians now is now the parliament. You should just elect a leadership in the parliament that can hold the executive accountable to Nigeria, such that the little resources we have can be managed judiciously for the benefit of Nigerians. Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Igor.
It's a pleasure.
This is a continuing conversation. By the time they are inaugurated, we'll come back and review it and probably set agenda for them.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Igor. Thank you. And that's the end of the interview segment. We'll take this short break, and when I return, I'll give my closing statements. Please stay with us. Welcome back. And here are my closing statements. The Constitution states unambiguously that the role of government is the security and welfare of the people. Since 1999, Nigeria has plummeted terribly on every index used to measure the nation's health status among the Committee of Developed Nations. Why is this so? The various arms of government have shirked their sacred responsibilities, but instead, individuals and groups of public officials have feathered their personal nests, as it were. In the executive arm, presidents, governors, local government chairmen have all failed to govern for the people. In the judiciary, various judges and justices have failed in upholding the cause of justice, but rather desecrated the temple of justice through a resort to rampant bribery and latching onto tenuous technicalities. Critically, the legislature, both federal and states, have been worse than a mere rubber stamp. They have become essentially a supine and insipid appendage of the various executive branch. Consequently, the art of governance has been reduced to a terrible and pitiable charade, a tragicomedy of the most bizarre type. Elected and appointed officials celebrating ridiculous accomplishments with much fanfare, even as over 133 million Nigerians wallow in extreme poverty and misery, and Nigerian working class are emigrating in their tens of thousands to safe havens abroad. And so I speak here to the new set of persons about to mount the saddle of political leadership in a few weeks. Will you put Nigeria first in your dealings? To the legislature especially, both at the federal and 36 states, your assignment, though simple and straightforward, yet is sacred and carries enormous responsibilities. The easier route is to follow the well-beaten path of your predecessors, which is surrender your rights to the executive arm and do nothing really consequential. Just observe the motions. Approve everything the executive puts forward so as not to be seen to be in confrontation with the president and governors, and so waste the next 4 years playing useless politics. But that, in my opinion, is the way of cowards, and I hope to God you are not. So let me humbly present to you the members of the 10th National Assembly 3 key legislative agenda to contemplate and consider in the interest of Nigeria. Amending the 1999 Constitution has become a matter of urgent strategic importance. The 3 key amendments I am recommending for your kind considerations are: number 1, the complete operational and legislative autonomy for local government areas. Number 2, approve urgently state/community policing. And number 3, the appointment of INEC chair and the national commissioners and resident commissioners, plus the IG of police and the heads of the EFCC and ICPC by the National Judicial Council to be approved by the National Assembly. Now, this exercise was done previously by the president, but it doesn't have to be like that again. Now, the previous National Assembly has adopted a less than noble and patriotic approach, but with the level of underdevelopment we are faced, you have a chance to adopt significant positive change in the governance of our country. And I hope you took this path. History beckons on you. Will you rise to the occasion and be genuine patriots? Will you cast aside primordial interests of your political parties, tribes, and religions, and instead put the survival of Nigeria paramount? I sincerely hope you do so. Remember, change requires action, and positive change requires positive action. I believe in a new Nigeria, and it is possible. And those are my closing thoughts. Now, that's the program today. Remember to follow me on my different social media handles. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch this particular video and the others there at your convenience. Drop your comments also. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.